Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So in my today's video is going to be slightly different, right? So over here, what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to talk about companies in the electric high voltage segment, right? So and the four companies which I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to do a comparison and do an analysis, right? So the most interesting part of the work that I do, right? And when I teach people also, right, and mentor them. So it's sometimes when you upload videos and things, right? So people come and comment and ask you for certain analysis. I was not aware of these four companies and what they do. So in one of my videos, one of the guy commented and said, "Sir, can you do the analysis for these companies and look into it?" So I was like, "Okay, let's look into it and see," because you need to understand that even though I search for companies and do analysis, there are close to 5,000 companies listed, right? Not everything is possible. So I try to do as much as possible in the sectors which I understand and which I like, right? Not every companies that I can go through it, but sometimes through these comments and everything, right? You get to know about certain companies, you learn about them, and be very honest with you, it was quite an interesting learning from me. And I learned quite a few things, and I'm definitely going to share it with you. So before I start that, let me. So what I did, right, in order to share the whole thing, right, I made a small presentation. So I'll take you through that. We'll go through the companies, the main products that they do and in which industry they are used. Then we'll go through them, whether do they have any advantages in the industry that they operated. Then we'll go through their recent Q4 and FY26 number and compare them. Then look at their margins and then see what the company is doing in terms of capex or expanding their capacity in terms to grow their numbers. So that is one of the most important thing. And the last thing is like I looked it from the valuation perspective, and in case if I was investing them, what decision would I take? Okay, so let's get into it. So let me just share my screen. So the companies that I'm going to talk about today are these four companies: Vidya Wires, Precision Wires, Ramratna Wires, and KSH International. So we'll just go through all of them. So if you look at the in terms of product, right? If you look at Vidya Wires, they make enamel copper winding wires. Precision Wires also makes same kind of wires, and Ramratna Wires makes a copper winding wire plus conductors. And if you look at KSH International, they make this continuously transported conductors and specialized wires. So that is, these are the main products. And if you look at it, the common thing that we see, right, that most majority of the products are used in transformers and power. So this is where their main products. So these are the main products that they are into. Obviously, they make certain other small products also, which you can check on your own. But over here, I've taken the main products for which they are known for. And if we look in terms of the advantages that the companies have, right? So if you look from in terms of precision wire, the only advantage from my research I could find out that it is the largest listed company with with the largest winding wire company in India, and they have a massive scale advantage. So obviously, the bigger you are, the more capacity you have, the more operating leverage you have. So that's the advantage precision wise have. Leaving that aside, there is nothing. And if you look at in terms of Ratna wires, now the way they have differentiated themselves, or you can say, is right, even though they manufacture this enamel copper wires, right? But they offer the widest range, in terms of the thickness and thinness and all those things. And the other thing that they're doing is right, they're opening, they're starting a new plant in Rajasthan, Bhiwadi, which is India's largest copper tube and pipeline. And according to them, if you look at their investor presentation, they're saying that this plant will help them to reduce India's import dependency on these kind of product by almost 70%. I mean, let's see. So that is one thing which I see as an advantage for them, right? Otherwise, it's the same. They're in commodity business. If you look in terms of Vidya Wires, they recently listed and they're obviously into this wire. They do not have any specific advantage at all, right? There is nothing at this point of time which it can be differentiated from others. And if you look at the last company, which is KSH International, I think they have the biggest moat, right? Because in India, they are the largest manufacturers of CTC wire, and in anyone to enter into this, how to say, in this section, right, of the CTC, there's a high entry barrier. In their PPT, they had clearly told that, sorry, in their presentation, that anyone who's entering this section, right, it takes the player at least minimum 5 to 7 years to scale to that level. So that is one thing. They are into a section where they manufacture product where the entry barriers are very high. It's not like that, right? I'm selling some clothes and tomorrow someone can open a shop next to me start selling clothes and my business might go out of. But over here, anyone who would, even if they're trying to take advantage of this situation and want to enter it, it will take them a period of 5 to 7 years, which protects KSH International over its business. The other thing that they have is like HDC advantage, right? They are the only Indian suppliers which are approved for high HVDC transformers. So that is another important thing. And obviously, because their products are special and very unique to them, they have a better pricing power and higher margins for this. So let's see in terms of the numbers or the recent result which they had. If we look at the revenue growth, right, for the Q4, especially, right, actually everyone had a minimum growth of 50%. If you look at Vidya Wires grew by almost 58%, Precision Wire grew by 67%, Ramratna Wires grew by 83%. And the biggest, I mean, the winner among them, if you look at all of them, KSH International grew by almost 101%. And if you look at the PAT growth also, if the only companies which got the operating leverage were Precision Wires and Ramratna Wires. If you look at Vidya Wires, it's around 55%. And for KSH International, it only grew by around 87%. So in terms of growth, as for the Q4 numbers, they all have the growth. The profit is growing. Obviously, the operating leverage is not there at this point of time. That could be for multiple reasons, which you might look later. If they are investing in a growth or opening up new plants or expanding their capacity, so we'll just look into that. So this is the Q4 comparison. And if we look at the FY26 comparison, right, for Vidya Wires, the revenue grew only by around 24.24%. Precision Wire grew by around 36.8%. Ramratna Wire grew by around close to 41%. And KSH International, again, I would personally say is the winner because they just did not grow, their numbers overall in Q4. But if you look at the whole year, they have grown their number at part. If you look at their growth also, the only two companies again who got the operating leverage of Precision Wire and Ratna Wires because they are established companies. Vidya Wires recently came with their IPO. KSH also International recently came with their IPO and they're expanding. And same thing is happening with Vidya Wires. And if you look in terms of ROE, they all are quite decent from about 20%. And if you look at in terms of the overall return on equity, Vidya Wires take the number. But the another thing, right? The sales are growing. It's all good number. But let's look at what what is the growth in terms of volume because volume tells you what is the demand. And if you look at the volume perspective, right? So again, over here, the winner is KSH International because their volume grew by almost 21%. Ramratna was between around 18 to 20. For Precision Wire, is only 12 to 14%. And for Vidya Wires, it was only around 6.5%. I think that is one of the reasons why their overall growth for the whole year was only 24.2%. These are the numbers, and keep it remember because when we talk further and when we give the information, it will be very important. And if we go further in the margin comparison, they almost have, how to say, similar range of EBITDA margin and close to PAT margin. But if you look over here, again, KSH International has the best margin in terms of the PAT margin, in not just in Q4 of FY26, but for the whole year also. And obviously, as I told you earlier, right, they have the advantage of the products that they make, which are very unique and the entry barriers are very high. So they get the better pricing power and better margins. Okay. That is one of the reasons. But overall, they are almost close to similar, especially if we take it Vidya Wires, Precision Wire, and Ramratna Wires, because they all make these copper wires which are used. And let's look further, right? So we have already seen, the numbers, what they do, what are the advantages and everything. But another important thing is, right, okay, the growth for Q4 FY26 and full year FY26 is done. Now, what next year for FY27? Because that is the most important thing, right? Because whenever we are investing in a, how to say, whenever one invests in a company, right? It's not about what has happened in the past. It's not about what is happening in the future. And that's what market looks at, right? Stock market is not a backward looking engine. It's a forward looking engine. It's trying to see what is going to happen in the future and accordingly tries to derate or re-rate the company, right? So that is also very important. So now we looked at the numbers. We saw that Precision Wire and Ramratna Wires have the operating leverage. Vidya Wires is completely new. KSH International, has a specific moat related to them. That is all good, right? Let's see what are these four companies doing in order to grow their revenue further in the coming years. So let's just go back to the presentation and we'll go through it. So if we look for Vidya Wires, right? So their current capacity is around 19,000 metric tons, and They have done a new expansion which will take their capacity expansion to almost to 36,000 to 37,000 metric ton. So if you actually see, they're trying to increase their capacity by almost 90 to 95%, which is actually a good sign. Like, I know they are small, do not have the any specific mode, but if you are able to expand your capacity automatically, and if the demand is there, you're able to increase your revenue, you're able to increase your profit, and obviously as this plant matures, you'll get the operating leverage also. In the phase one, which has already been installed and commenced this year in February 2026, the output was around 800 metric ton. So obviously the capacity will, how to say, ramp up in going future. In the phase two, what they're doing, right? They're adding another 8,000 to 9,000 metric ton, and this will be done this year only by Diwali. That's what the management has said. And obviously the production will start. But from the number, we can clearly see the ramp up of the capacity will take some time, right? Because the first phase they have installed around 6,000 to 7,000 metric ton, but they were able to, started with only 800 metric tons. So obviously this will take time. So this new plant which is coming up, increasing the capacity, right, will I think can easily uh, fuel their growth for the next 2 to 3 years. And the other important thing, right, what the management said in terms of guidance, right, which is very important. So before I get into the guidance, one thing I want to tell about guidance. Guidance is also very important because you come to know what the management is saying and where the company is going, and if there are any challenges or there are any opportunities. If you look over here, right, the management said that the capacity utilization is around 50 to 60% in FI, will be around 50 to 60% in FY27 with the new added capacity. And by FY28, it will add up to 80% capacity. As I said, right, this new capacity, along with the old capacity added, will fuel the growth for the next couple of years. And the other thing which they said, right, the EBITDA margin will also improve because they're going to add a new product, especially aluminum products, which are almost 3.5 times more, processed more than a copper. And in terms of revenue guidance, they have not given any revenue guidance. But I personally believe with the way they are increasing their capacity, I think they should be easily able to grow their revenue at least by around close to 40% easily because they're almost doubling their capacity. So this is for Vidya Wires. And if you look for precision wires, be very honest, the management has not given any guidance. I couldn't find it on screener. Their current capacity is around 61,000 metric ton, and they're increasing their capacity by another 4,400 metric ton, which will start only the production in FY27. And if you look in terms of growth, in terms of overall, how to say, overall, the factory output, it is not going to increase by much. It is only, I think, less than 10, how to say, around close to 7 to 8%. So I think what Precision Mile is looking at is like whatever capacity they have, they want to utilize it at maximum. So I do not see much growth coming over here. And obviously, I will show that when I'm going to show you the valuation which I have done, right? And if you look from Ramratna Wires, right, so their current capacity at this point is around 45,500 metric ton. And in that, they're adding around 3,600 metric ton, which is around close to around 9%. But what is happening at the same time, right? They're adding this new Bhiwadi plant for production of copper tubes and pipes, and that has a capacity of almost 24,000 metric tons. So if you look at it, that is almost, if once that comes into picture, right, that will almost increase their capacity by another 50% easily. So over here, the first phase of the plant is already went into production in June 2025. And in 2026, it will, the ramp up will continue, the utilization will improve. And what the management said that last year, this plant already contributed around 1,000 crore in the overall revenue. And at a peak, at the full capacity utilization, it can go up to around 3,000 to 3,500 crore. Over here also, management has not given any guidance, but if we just look from the, you know, from the increase in capacity perspective and what the new plan contributed, I think they can easily increase their revenue by easily around 25 to 30% easily. So let's look at what is KHS International doing in terms of Capex, right? So what is their current capacity, which is installed, is around 43,400 metric ton, which includes their, their super plant under the phase one. And that plant with the new capacity ran at only 50 to 55% utilization. So what they are trying to do, right? The second phase of the plant, once it's up and up, they are trying to increase their, how to say, capacity to 59,000 metric ton. And they're saying that this plant second phase should be completed by around Q2 of FY27. So if you look at this number, their overall capacity is going to increase by almost 35%. And management said that in terms of peak utilization, it will take at least 2 to 3 years. So again, if you look from the increase in capacity utilization and in terms of fueling the revenue growth, I think for the next 2 years they are still good enough. And another thing what the management said, and which is very important, right? They're saying after adding this 59,000 metric ton, right, the overall capacity increasing to 59,000 metric ton in their super plant, they have another option to add another 10,000 metric ton, which they're not adding right now, but they will wait and watch and see how the demand is growing, what is required. So if that gets added up, they can easily add another, what to say, another close to around 15 to 20% of the capacity. And the another important thing is, right, in the FY27 year, this new plant will help them recover the fixed costs which they have inputted, and then from FY28 they'll start getting the operating leverage. So if this year, if we if someone looking for operating leverage for KSH International from this plant, it will not happen. It will only happen the next year. And the other thing what they're trying to do, right, for their super plant, they are trying to put a rooftop solar plant so that they are not dependent upon external electricity. Electricity is internally generated, which will obviously help them to reduce their power costs. And another thing that they're doing is, right, they are doing this green copper backward integration, right? And they expect this commissioning to happen in the second half of FY27. And in terms of revenue guidance, if you see, right, management has said that they're confident of maintaining last year growth rate. So last year they grew by almost close to 60%. So they're saying that this year also they're going to grow at 60%. So if you look from the capex and guidance perspective, I feel that KSH International and Vidya Wires are the one which are doing the biggest capex. Then the third comes is Ramratna Wires, and Precision Wires is literally doing a very small one, which doesn't make much difference to their overall capacity. And if we take all these numbers into consideration, right, and look at the valuation, right. So as I said, right, if I take, so first one is for Ramratna. Sorry, I forgot to add the name. So they can grow their revenue by almost 40%, which I've taken because they're almost doubling their capacity. So if you look at your forward PV, it comes to around 23.59% and a peg of around 0. Less than 1. And if I look at the precision wise, right, I'd give them only 20% because they have not given any revenue guidance. They are not adding their capacity at much higher level. So with the capacity ramping up in utilization, I think they can do a 20% growth according to my estimate. And obviously, all these growth numbers which I have taken is at the lowest and not at the highest end. So that gets a peg of 2. And if you look at Ramratna Wires, I've taken around 30%. So they get a forward P of around 24.7 and a peg of around 1. And if I look at KSH International with the management guidance of 64%, so they get a peg of around 0.5. So it's again less than 1 and a forward P of around 32 comparatively. And if you look at the PAT numbers, right, I have not added any operating leverage. I have taken just the PAT margin percentage, what they did this year. So if they're able to improve their PAT margin, that is also going to make this, much valuable. So if you look from the valuation perspective in terms of capex perspective and what the management is doing, my personal choice, if I was investing, would have been Vidya Wires and KSH International. In that also, if I have only one choice to invest, I would go for KSH International. You ask me, Masood, what is the reason why? Because first of all, they're guiding higher growth than Vidya Wires, and at the same time, they have a moat, right? They are, so there is no competitor who can come and take their main business away from them. But in terms of Vidya Wires, even though they are expanding, and in terms of if something goes wrong and some other competitors come and takes their order and everything, that could be a problem. So in short, all the companies are doing they have done really great this year. And if I look from the future perspective, especially Vidya Wires, Ramratna Wires, and Kitchen, they are doing their expansion, you know, and growing well. And the opportunities are quite well. So if anyone is looking into it, please look into it, do your analysis, and take a decision. Personally, if I would have been given a chance, the only company, if I get a chance to invest only in one company, I would go for KSH International. You might ask why not Vidya Wires? It is small and it is growing at such a faster rate. The only reason I'm going for that is because they are predicting their growth at a much higher. At the same time, they have a name and that they have their market is protected because of high entry barriers. So that is the only reason. And if you guys like this analysis and this video, please do hit like and subscribe to my channel. And if you want to learn from me or get mentored from me, please do comment me. I'll definitely get in touch with you. Thank you and God bless you.